Hey, welcome to Playing for Keeps, the show where we take a deep dive into emotional intelligence, sex, love, adult attachment theory, mental health, therapy, and everything in between that creates great relationships. Your host, DJ, is a certified life coach and emotional intelligence practitioner. She's here to be of service to all the listeners interested in love and relationship. Now, here's your host, DJ.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. We have Dunyell Dawson. She is the executive director and founder of My Girls Inc. My Girls Inc. mission is to help girls become emotionally and mentally healthy so that they can excel academically and beyond. The vision and mission for My Girls Inc. is to help girls achieve their full potential despite their personal, social, and environmental issues and help their families with support and resources. As a teenage girl, Dunyell faced challenges such as teen pregnancy, dating violence, suicidal ideations, and childhood trauma. While in a domestic violence situation as an adult with her kids in 2010, her vision for My Girls Inc. was formed. As a teenager, Dunyell didn't receive the help she needed and wanted to change that for young girls in similar situations. Dunyell holds a plethora of certifications in mental health and the wellness space. She is a mother of three, a mentor, an entrepreneur, speaker, writer, and a motivational blogger. Today, Dunyell wants to speak on dating, taking notice to red flags, and a few other things. Welcome, Dunyell. How are you doing today?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Dominique. I just want to say I'm so proud of you and what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming on today as well. I know you'll provide a lot of insight and a lot of great advice to just anybody, women, men who are out in the dating scene and who want to make the right choice. So let's kind of just dive into it. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself personally and just...
Right. Well, I think you hit on most of it. You really did as far as what I do, My Girls Inc., my why behind My Girls Inc., why I got started. And I guess to maybe take one of the whys out of that, again, going back to my childhood and my teenage years, and fast forward to me becoming a woman and dealing with a lot of domestic violence and a lot of different issues and challenges that I had. And once I started, going through trauma therapy and learning about domestic violence and learning about depression and the different things that I was dealing with, it all takes you back to your childhood and to the trauma and the things that you experienced. And so many times we want to just look at our symptoms or the behavior, but you always have to go and deal with the root. And so that's why My Girls Inc. is so important to me, because, I want to have that program for girls so that when they do become adults, that they are not derailed, by the things that happen to them in childhood or the things that happen to them when they are teenagers, that they have positive mentors in place, that they have positive programs that work on self-worth and self-image, life skills, money management, all of those things, so that when they become adult women, that they can really thrive. And I think that's important. The earlier that you can get intervention, the better. And so that's really what I'm big on.
Okay. Tell us a little bit of just about your own personal experiences and kind of what kind of the uphill to where you are today, and just the advice you could probably give to a younger girl or somebody who's out right now in the dating scene, or even just things that's happened to you and how it kind of correlates to maybe choices and decisions you made in your dating.
Right. Well, I think this is a lot for a lot of African American women, And I'm sure it's in other races too, but just I can only speak for what I know, and looking at family members and the dynamics. And I think one of the things is that most of us didn't have our biological fathers. Thankfully, I had a bonus, or I don't like to use the word step. I said the only thing step is that he stepped up,
Right.
and he passed away in 2014, but he came in my life when I was about 3 years old. But there was still that big void of my biological dad not really being in my life. I knew him, but we didn't really have that connection. And at some point, he actually committed a crime against his estranged wife, and he had to go to prison. So, for a long time, I didn't see him. And then when he did get back out, the relationship was still very troubled. And I think that void, those abandonment issues of not having him, just kind of feeling rejection of, I have this dad, and, why is this person not loving on me in my life? And, when you're growing up, you don't really think about the magnitude and how it really impacts you, but it does. I think also, I was molested at 9 years old by one of my family members. That was another big thing that really impacted my life, because at 9 years old, I didn't know anything about sex or anything of those natures. And so when, you have someone that you love and trust, and they violate you in that way, that just opens up a whole door of a lot of different things. And for me, at 12 years old, I found myself dating someone who was abusive at 12 years old.
Wow.
We would get together, he would torment me, throw my shoes over the house, just all kind of stuff. So I think that those things, experiencing the not having a dad, the being molested, those things kind of opened the door for me to probably feel like it was okay to deal with men who treated me badly. Because if I got people who love me, who is treating me badly, and that's okay, then I guess it's okay for others to do the same thing. So I think that kind of set the tone. So as a teenager, I found myself really looking for love in men, looking for validation, just, being very promiscuous, and just searching for something that I would find out I would never find, and then I went on to, even in high school, to be raped. So that was more trauma. Had my daughter at 16, didn't know anything about becoming a mother. Her father was very abusive to me. So by the time I got in my 20s, 25 is when I got married. And meet someone, they sweep you off, your feet, but eventually it turns into the arguments, the verbal abuse. I find out this person has a drinking problem, but again, we've been taught so much marriage, and, I wanted to be married so bad. So I went ahead at 29 and married that person, even though I knew that there were issues, and it only got worse. And, it escalated to some physical things, physical abuse as well. And then it was also trauma to my children, because they were in that home. And
Gotcha.
so once I was able to, get out of that, but it took me a while. Most of the time with domestic violence, they say the average woman may go back 7 times before they really get out. And because it wasn't a lot of physical abuse, I think we always dismiss it or minimize it. And we say, well, they just called me a name and I called them a name back, so it's not that deep, but it's real. And then, once Project Renewal, I actually worked for a domestic violence organization part-time. And that is the same organization that helped me. So when I was going through those, going through those things, I finally seek help through them, found out about how to go about getting a temporary protection order, which most people just call TPO. I started attending those support groups through them. That was really helpful for me because, first of all, it gave me more insight on domestic violence. I realized that I was actually being abused. I think around that time, all that stuff had happened with Rihanna and Chris Brown. And
Yeah.
so in my mind, I was like, well, I'm not, beat up and bruised up like Rihanna. I'm really not being abused. I was, again, minimizing it. And so when I went in those doors and I learned about domestic violence from those therapists that were there that facilitated the group, I realized that, yes, I am in an abusive relationship. And even though I realized it at first, I still kept trying to make it work. You know, I would leave, I would come back. I think another part is faith, especially in our community. We've been taught so much when it relates to our faith. And so it impacts our relationships and everything. And one of the biggest things is you always hear, don't get a divorce. So, you know, I'm trying like not to get a divorce. And, you know,
Right.
which is not correct, because if women, men, whoever are in a abusive relationship, you should know that God doesn't want you in that. And it's okay that if you have to leave that relationship, but that was on me. And I was like, you know, I can't get a divorce, da, 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 da. So I struggled with that. But like I said, I kept going back to those support groups. I kept getting educated. I kept getting the reinforcement that I needed to move forward. And eventually I started getting the counseling that helped me to go back and deal with the many things I just talked about that happened to me in my childhood, that happened to me as a teenager, the various domestic violence relationships that I had been in, because it was more than 1, 2, or 3. It was a pattern, but a lot of times that's it. You know, if you don't deal with the issues at hand, if you don't go back to the root, you know, you're in this pattern and you're trying to figure out why. Like, why do I keep choosing this type of man? Why do I continue in these kind of relationships? Well, you know, it's the things that you've been through. And also, you know, and a lot of Black women, I've had this conversation as well. We've had those moms who are not so healthy. And that was another issue. My mother, I love her. I feel like she did the best she could with what she had. And she, you know, they have, you know, our parents, they have a past too. They have trauma. They have different things that they've experienced. So all that comes to the table. But she was very emotionally and mentally abusive, and sometimes verbally. So that was another factor. Again, someone who loves you, if they can call you this, if they can manipulate you and play games. So when that man comes who's saying, hey, I love you, you know, you're figuring it's not really that big of a deal. You know, it's more of the dysfunction that I've been living in anyway. And we, sometimes when you live in dysfunction so long, it becomes normal. It becomes a way of like, this is just life. And that's really what it was. So I, you know, thankfully through them, you know, I was able to also get individual counseling and really just start, like I say, unpacking that stuff. Really just trying to figure out, why have I been on this cycle of the, you know, getting into these abusive relationships, and start working on me. And also I got, you know, counseling for my children as well, because again, they cannot be in those situations and not be impacted as well. So that's one of the things I advise anybody, if you're in that, have been in it, make sure that you get your kids the help that they need, because we don't want them to grow up becoming abusers or being abused. And when they go through that, they're at a higher risk. So my uphill would be years of, like I said, the counseling, the support groups, whatever I needed to do to get well. And it took a while. You know, and I got a divorce. Thankfully, I got out safe and sound. And, you know, we have one child together. We co-parent. Things are better than they have ever been between him and I. But it took a while, because even after my divorce, he would still stop me. You know, I may show up at a gas station. There he is. It was just a lot. And so, you know, finding myself again, you know, to be honest, you know, because I'm being honest, that's who I am and transparent. I actually, towards the end of my marriage, after I had prayed, fasted, you know, just kept trying. And I remember going to church, and the pastor was even saying at this point, you know, God is not calling you all to be in abusive relationships. And I felt like it was just for me. So when I heard that, I said, well, now I feel like God is saying it's okay for me to get a divorce. But towards the end of my marriage, I ended up finding myself in an affair, and this affair went on for a while, and which is not uncommon. You talk to a lot of women who've been through this. They have at some point, you know, they go there. And it wasn't about, of course, people are quick to point the finger, well, why would you do this and why would you do that? But when you're being abused on that level, you just become, I felt dead. I really did. I didn't feel attractive. I just felt really numb and I really felt dead. And, I was seeking and searching for, this attention and all the things that as a woman and even as a man that you would desire.
Right.
As humans, we have those basic needs. We have the need for love and human connection. And here I was married to someone that literally would get in the bed and just turn their back to me. People would tell me, well, try this and try that. And I would do everything. And it was just not enough. So I started really feeling like I was the issue. Now, this was before I started the counseling that this affair happened. But in that, even though I knew that that was wrong, but one of the things that the good that came out of that bad was I realized it wasn't me. I may have had my issues, but this person had made me thought all that time it's just about you and da 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 da. And it was like, no, I'm not. And then I think just having someone to, pretty much show you that you are a great woman. Now, I didn't want it that way. It came that way, but it was good. It came out of the bad. And I think at that point I was able to start pick myself back up and say, okay, this person has put this blindfold on me and made me think it was me all this time, but I'm not that bad. I'm a good woman and I do deserve to be loved. But of course, that affair didn't work out. That person, that it wasn't right. And that person wasn't healthy either. I had to forgive myself, forgive him or whatever. But I share that because I just like to be transparent. And so a lot of counseling, but that's the biggest thing I could say. Therapy is it is the greatest thing, of course, your faith and your prayer. But I think, again, in our community, we like to just tend to focus on the faith, but faith without works is dead. And it's okay to have God, and it's okay to have God and therapy, you know? And so that was the biggest game changer for me was therapy. And then I would meet therapists who were honest about, the things that they went through, the struggles that they went through. Some of them were dealing with depression, because for a while I was like, well, I got all this baggage. I'm dealing with depression because I wanted to be go back to school and become a therapist or a social worker. And I thought, well, how am I going to do this? But when I could hear them say, hey, I deal with this and I'm over here counseling you, that was another, eye opener. And then I would say, like I said, I got out of that marriage, got an apartment, started my life over, just became more of an independent woman, working on myself, working with, my kids and all of those things. 2018, I believe it was, I started selling, 2018, I started selling paparazzi, the $5 bling that that I'm sure you all have heard about. But that was good for me too, because it gave me something, it gave me a business and it gave me something to look forward to. But it really helped me to come out of my shell, because one of the things that, I dealt with from going through all that stuff was being very depressed, anxiety. I had trouble, like I wouldn't be on here speaking to you, or I wouldn't want to go into a big crowd of people. And so with paparazzi, we had to get on and go live on Facebook, show our jewelry. When you're out and about, you got to talk to people. So it pushed me out of that. It really helped me with my anxiety. And it really gave me a purpose. It really gave me something, that was mine. And I felt like, all of those things that those guys and people had told me, you're nothing, you're not going to be anything. It made me feel like, what I am going to be something. I do have something. I'm a businesswoman. I'm an entrepreneur. So that was one of those things that helped me as well. And then once I started my paparazzi journey, I went back and I looked in my book and I saw that in 2010, I had the vision to start My Girls Inc. So in 2018, I went ahead and started My Girls Inc. That was August of 2018. That was another big, just a pushing moment where I said, I got to give birth to this vision that I've been holding on way too long. And it was something else that pushed me. I think when you start to accomplish things, and it's not about the accolades, but it's about you. It's about you pushing through those barriers and accomplishing something for yourself. And once you start to do that, that helps you to feel better about you. I think it decreases the depression. It's all a part of the healing. So those two things were very beneficial to me. Also, and I'm jumping around because, like I said, it's been a lot. My journey has really been a lot. But those are two big things. But I'm going to go back a little bit. So back after my marriage and me just becoming more independent, getting my own place, and you remember because you would come to the group sometime, but I started that woman to woman group. Yeah, well, that was another thing, because my thing was I didn't want to just keep everything I knew. I wanted to share my journey, share my knowledge so that other women and girls, which, like I said, those are the things those are my passion, so that they can move forward and move past some of the issues and the struggles. And so that was something that also helped me. But even when I was doing that, I was still getting my therapy. I later went on and got into another relationship, didn't get married, but that relationship lasted about 3 years. This man really, I just really thought like he is definitely gonna be the one. Really swept me off my feet at first, but as time went on and I opened up to him about my past and what I had went through, I realized he started to kind of use it against me. Like I may say, hey, I used to deal with abuse. I don't like when someone says this to me or call me this. And he would on purpose call me those things. And then he would act like, oh, I'm just playing, I'm just teasing because he was a jokester. But that's another form of emotional abuse. And as women, we don't always see those things because we think, it's not that deep, but it is. Because if someone's telling you that this hurts me or this bothers me, please don't do it. And they continue to do it, that's toxic. So he would do those things. Then, it was, he had a whole nother issue about, he wanted not just me, he wanted us to basically invite someone else in. I'm not doing that, so that made me feel like I wasn't enough as well, but I had to stand my ground and say, you know what, that's just not what I'm going to do. That's not what I'm into. And so from there, just different little stuff started happening. Eventually I found out, he cheated on me. He denied that. We stayed together a little bit longer. At first he was, oh, I want to marry you. We were going to couples counseling and all of this stuff. Towards the end, he was changing his tune about a lot of things. And so when that ended, I really went through a bad depression. Like I really was grieving for a long, long time because I really thought that he was going to be the one, that was going to be my happy ending to all what I had went through. And through the time that we were together, my bonus dad passed in 2014. So he was there for me through that. And so I just knew we were going to make it. His dad passed a year after that. And we went through that together. So we went through a lot of things. He had some health issues. I was there for him for that. So I just knew, he was going to be the one. So, when I got through that, that was another moment where it was like I had gotten up, but then it was like, now what I do give him credit for is that he I love talking, I love speaking and writing and all of that. So he said, well, why don't you start a blog? So he helped me start DD Soapbox. That was a good thing that came out of that. Thinking of my son, who always says people come in your life for a blessing or a lesson. So, that's deep too. So a lot of things with him was definitely a lesson, but there were some areas where he was a blessing, but he just was not healthy and he was not ready for what I wanted, which is a committed relationship that's going to lead to marriage. And so I don't even want to say I wasted 3 years because again, lessons are lessons. So it was still lessons. It wasn't wasted. I'm not going to even look at it like that. Right. But that to me kind of set me back because, I was doing good with my woman to woman. Some of the stuff I'm doing now, I probably would have been doing then, but sometimes we get in relationships, we get distracted, which is what I did. And I started putting off of my dreams, what I really wanted to do. And I actually went back to school during that time, which was another good thing. I wanted to do nursing. So I went back to school while we were dating. I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to, become an LPN. So I got some credits there. I got to take my psychology, which I love. But then I decided I don't, didn't want to be a nurse, but I got my blog started. Like I say, we broke up, went through a bad depression. I've talked a little bit about my daughter. So right after that happened, that was the end of 2016. So 2017, I'm going into this year, and this was going to be my 40th birthday. And so, I'm excited. And this is a time that, you want to have this milestone birthday party and just really, really, really celebrate. And coming into my 40th birthday, I was so depressed because we had just broke up like the end of 2016. So here you got the holiday season. You've already put in your mind that you're going to celebrate this holiday with this person. And now we've ended. And on top of that, my daughter comes to me. She's now 19. Then she was 17. So she comes to me telling me she's depressed and she's going through stuff. When I turned 40, that same weekend, my daughter has a suicide attempt. So this was the beginning of 2017. So that was a lot. I only by the grace of God that I got through it, because I myself really was at a point where I was already I won't say I had a plan, but I really felt like I was getting to that place of being suicidal just from that breakup. So it was like all of this stuff just, came crashing down on me, and I was still grieving the loss of my dad. And I didn't say that, I lost my biological dad. I lost him the same year that my ex-boyfriend lost his dad. So it was a lot of stuff happened. So you talking about feeling like you done built yourself up and then bam.
All this other stuff happens.
It was like, what? It was like, God, can anything more happen? So that's how that was. So the beginning of 2017, I was like, okay, I couldn't even worry about my own stuff no more, because now I had to focus on my daughter and trying to get her well and healthy and whatever she needed. So it shifted to her. And with, young people and mental health conditions comes a whole lot of challenges. So let's just say it was a challenging year. It was a lot, like I thought it was over with, but it wasn't. It was a whole lot of stuff going on. And I had to, get her the right therapist. We had to get therapy together as a family because it had impacted all of us, and it was a lot. At the same time, I had my son. I have 3 kids. So my oldest, she's away in another state where she went to college at. And so she's there, and it's just me, and my 2 kids, but I'm dealing with all this stuff with my, she's 19, but she was then 17. My son, who is 2 years younger than her. And I had taken off all my focus off of him because I was like, well, he's doing good. He's okay. And I was so focused on her. So after all of that, I started even having to go back. It was things with him because, I had kind of just put him to the side, because
Right.
I was so focused on her, and I'm a single mom. So that was a lot. So we had a lot of healing to do as a family. And then the end of 2017, we moved out of the apartment that I had been wanting to move out of, moved into my aunt's home because she was moving somewhere else. And I'm like, great. Week after we moved, I get a call on a Sunday, which I'll never forget. And it's my little cousin. And he's like, Grandma, he says, my grandma is not waking up. And I'm like, what? Which is my auntie, which this is her home that I live in now. Well, she had a heart attack in her sleep. And so this is my mother's sister. And she had, earlier that year, had battled breast cancer. She had gotten through it. And so we thought everything was okay. She's gotten through chemo. She's gotten through radiation. So that was another trauma. And I was just like, God, I don't even know what else to do at this point because, she was more like a mom to me. She had been there, helped me to get my divorce. After my divorce, helped me get another vehicle, just a lot of things. Love my auntie. So it's been rough, you know. So by the time that happened, I had started back saying, I need to start another women's group. So in the midst, right before she passed, I had started my sister circle. But then she passed, and I was like, I don't feel like, you know, getting together or doing any events. So I still was just kind of going through it. So by the time I would say the beginning of 2018 came, like I said, just still going through stuff. But that's when I started my paparazzi journey. That really helped me with my depression. They helped me with my grief, focusing on that. The family therapist that we had, you know, she said, Dunyell, you gotta, you know, I know you love your kids and you're trying to help your daughter and you're trying to help your son, but what about you? You know, go back and think about your dreams and start focusing on those things. They're going to be okay. Your kids are going to be okay. And, you know, and start having them to be, you know, more responsible. Some of the chores and things that I was doing, you know, let them do some stuff. So that helped me a lot too. And I started really just kind of focusing on myself, getting my life back. I just went hard, you know, like I said, with my paparazzi, that really just helped me to get out there. I started blogging more, just speaking more about what I was going through. And at first, you know, it's weird because you feel that vulnerability hang over you like, did I say that? But then people would, you know, email me or post something and say, you know, thanks for sharing, Dunyell. That really helped me. You know, I'm going through something similar. And it just gave me the motivation to keep going.
Keep going. Yeah.
Right. And excuse me, y'all, I'm over 40, so I might be having a hot flash. That's a whole nother topic. So so I just poured myself into into my business and really just started going hard. Then I went to a nonprofit workshop out here in Conyers. It was free. Cheryl Board, she's really, really good, wealth of knowledge when it comes to nonprofits. And she really just told me how to get it started, like gave me a whole binder full of the information, copies of everything that I would need. And I sat on it though. I got it and I still was like sitting on it, like, you know. Then I had earlier that year, 2018, I also had sundresses and hats, women's empowerment brunch for my sister circle. So I pushed through, had an event April of 2018. And everybody was just talking about how phenomenal it was, and you need to do more stuff for women and da-da-da-da. And in that, I told them that I wanted to start My Girls Inc. And so one of the ladies that was there, she knew someone who had a nonprofit, and she said, Dunyell, I'm going to have her to call you. So she called me, and I had went to that nonprofit workshop. And so Robin, I always look at her as like a mentor. She really pushed me, and she said, because she would invite me, she has a nonprofit for girls as well, Bremy, and she would invite me to different functions that she would, you know, be doing so that I can volunteer and just kind of get my name out. And so she was like, well, you know, I want to put you on a flyer, but you need to go ahead and get your, you know, your business registered and do this and do that. So she really pushed me. And so she said, okay, go ahead and set a date and say you're going to have it done. So I remember it was one Saturday. I said, okay, I'm going to have it done by this Saturday. I got on to the Secretary of State for Georgia to register my business. And I was so just intimidated by, like, I don't know what I'm doing. This just seems like a lot. And I sat there for hours, when I tell you, just to register my business. But once I got on there and figured it out and just pushed through, I got it done. And I realized it wasn't even that hard. But I think sometimes we think it's so hard and we just tell ourselves that. And so when it comes time to execute, you know, we
tend to psych ourselves out.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth, psych ourselves out. And that's what I had done.
Let me ask you a few questions. We're going to kind of dig into what you talked about. So first, I want to kind of go back to childhood trauma and kind of give my own testament. I know something I came to realization about what I tended to do in relationships and what I'm trying to lean away from is, so with my background, I didn't have a good relationship with my father. Like, he was in my life, but through my teenage years, he wouldn't speak to me because he didn't like the decisions I made, right? So we
Right.
didn't have a good relationship. So what I tended to do in my relationships, I would tend to pick people who were avoidant or people who weren't good partners, and subconsciously I would try to recreate that dynamic. So I'm with somebody who just wasn't a good partner, and I would put all my energy into trying to recreate a bad relationship to a good one, and I was doing it subconsciously. I don't get if you get what I'm saying, but that's something
I
I know
do.
that's something I know I did subconsciously, and that's something I'm trying to steer away from, because in relationships I tend to try to anxiously control it. Like I'll tend to choose somebody who how do I put it, like an avoidant,
Passive.
somebody who's dismissive, somebody who I've even had abusive relationships myself, and I would just feel like, oh, well, I'm good enough to change them. Or even if I don't feel like I'm good enough to change them, I was up for the challenge because I wanted to recreate that dynamic I never was able to recreate in childhood. I don't know if you get that, but that's so I relate to you when you
Right.
talk about it all goes back to childhood, who you choose, why why you tolerate the things you tolerate, because that's what you grew up and that's what you're familiar with. And what we tend to do, we tend to
Right.
lean towards what we're familiar with. And sometimes we don't know a good thing because we're not familiar with it. And then sometimes when we obtain it, we don't know how to interact with it because it's not familiar. I know when I've gotten into relationships that were halfway decent, I ended up stirring up drama because I just wasn't used to a drama-free relationship. So just
Right.
to kind of go back to that. Now, when you talked about red flags, um, and kind of ignoring them or dismissing them because maybe they weren't so outrageous. Like, okay, he didn't exactly put his hands on me, but what examples could you give somebody who maybe felt some type of way about a certain situation, but then they kind of just left it
Mm-hmm.
alone because, like you said, it wasn't that extravagant. Maybe could you elaborate just a little bit on that, um, just in case we have listeners who may be in that situation?
Okay. I would say one thing is a person who does not validate your feelings. If they say things to you like, you're just sensitive, or you're just making a big deal out of this, or you're just insecure, and you're telling them like, this is how I feel, or this is how, when you said that it made me feel this, that, or the other, and they keep dismissing your feelings and making you think that something is wrong with you, which they call it gaslighting, when someone is, making you feel like you're crazy, you're
Mm-hmm.
the problem, you're the issue. So when you just know, like, like someone has said something to you and you're not being over the top, what they said hurt you, and this person flips it all the time to the point where you start questioning yourself, thinking like, is it really me? Maybe I am being too much. That's a number one sign that you are being verbally, emotionally, and mentally abused. And definitely if someone is calling you out your name, calling you the B word, the H word, any derogatory things, even sex is another thing that is overlooked. If you're with someone and they're trying to make you do things sexually that you're not comfortable with doing, and then they make you feel bad because you don't want to do it, that's a form of sexual abuse. Or someone who, there are situations where they tell you now, like in relationships, say for instance, you're asleep, you need to have conversations with the people you're dating, and let them know what's okay and what's not okay. You may say, if I'm asleep, we're not engaging in sex. But there are people who you may be asleep and they just feel like, well, I can just take it, and that's not right, So things like that. Or if you tell them to stop, whenever you tell them to stop, if it's uncomfortable, at whatever point, then they're supposed to do that. If they continue on, those are forms of sexual abuse. Cheating can also be a form of emotional abuse, especially when you take someone they become like a serial cheater. They're constantly cheating on you over and over again. And they continue to tell you like, you're the problem. Well, it's because you don't do this right, or you don't do that. That's emotional abuse. And those are things that we don't see, even financial. Say for instance, you're with a guy, and again, this can apply to a man being with a woman, because men can be abused as well. So it's on both sides. Teenagers, teen dating violence is real as well. So for anybody. But if you're with someone and they want to control your money, they want to know, what account your money is, where's your money going to, what account. They're always overseeing your money. They want to know how much you spent, and all this kind of stuff, but you know nothing about their finances, and they're just controlling yours. Or they may even, one of the things I went through when I was married was, say for instance, we may pay the bills, we're going half, right? But when we go to the grocery store, I'm buying all the groceries. Or if the kids have extracurricular activities, I'm paying for all of those. So in the end, my money is always being dwindled down, and this person always has an overflow, or they're stacking up. Because people who are abusive, they want to always remain in control. And so it's all about power and control. And so they know if you have money, that's a sense of independence, because if you needed to leave, if you needed to get your own place, you could do that. But if they keep you strapped, if they keep you financially in a bad situation, you're totally dependent on them. So you just have to watch out for people who are always taking from you money wise, and they're not putting anything back, and they're controlling the money and the finances. And they can do it in a very sneaky way, like simple things like having you buy all the groceries or you paying all the bills when they clearly have finances and they can help too. So that's not a healthy balance. I think people who are, if you're with someone and they're very possessive, very controlling, they want to know your every move. Sometimes we miss it because we think, oh, I just got with this person and, they care about me and they just into me. So they just calling to see how I'm doing. But pay attention. Are they constantly asking you, well, what you doing now? Where are you at now? Who are you with? All the time. That's a red flag. You got to pay attention to that. People who, they start drifting you away from your family and friends. They may even start, saying things to you like, well, that friend is not good, or that family member is this or that. And you find yourself just kind of, not being social anymore, not going around your friends, not going around your family, because they like to keep you isolated, because they don't want anyone getting in your ear to tell you the truth, or to tell you that, hey, you're in a bad situation, you're in a bad relationship.
Or, it's easier for them to control you. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I think those are number one, because in a healthy relationship, a person knows that you need your time, they need their time. They're going to want to do things with their friends sometimes, and you're going to want to do things with your friends, and the same thing with your family. And then sometimes you come together and you do things with family and friends. And I think that's another thing. When you have that person who never wants to go around your family or your friends, but they always want you to go around their family and friends, that's another indicator, because most of the time they have manipulated those people and they're comfortable in those environments, but they're not comfortable around your people because they don't know them and they have not, manipulated them. So they want to just keep that face of, I'm this decent person. They don't, they don't want them to see the other part. And, you can only keep a mask on for so long.
Got you. Okay. Now let me ask you this. So, distractions in relationships. So like you said before, we tend to get in relationships, and especially in the beginning, you are all about this person. Sometimes you drop your own goals, the things you want to do. And that's something you experience, something I've experienced, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other people have experienced in a healthy relationship. Or just if you're somebody who wants to be, a healthier person in a relationship, what advice would you give to somebody to not get so distracted and to, also be in tune in your relationship, but to also be in tune with yourself and focus on your goals? What advice would you give to somebody who struggles with that?
I think the number one thing is to remember that when you're going into a relationship, that you are still an individual, that you're going into a relationship, but you are still an individual. You cannot lose yourself. You cannot just lose your dreams and everything for someone else. And so we do drop things when we get into relationships, but the key is not to drop it. You know, if you love going to Zumba once a week, or you want to go to poetry once a week, and that's been your thing, keep doing it. Whatever you've been doing for your self-care, keep doing it, because you're bringing that person in your space, in your life, but it doesn't mean that you have to do away with those things that you already had going on, especially those things that are helping you to stay well, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, whatever those things are that brings you joy. You should keep those things going. And I think a healthy person will respect that. Hey, you know, when I met her, she was doing these things and she's still taking care of herself and keeping these things up. I think the minute when they see that we put everything down for them, that's really a red flag for them if they're paying attention. Like, this woman probably has been through some things, so she just don't put everything down for me. And people who are toxic, they're going to pick that up and take it and run with it, because they're like, okay, yeah, now I got her. She going to do all what I want, you know? So it's about standing your ground and still doing those things that you like to do. You're bringing that person into your world, but it doesn't mean that your world stops
And you consume them. Like,
right.
they're all in your world, and that you make them just top priority, and then that's it. I know that's something I've also had to learn for myself. Not making somebody just my top priority, and dropping other things that I've had going on, because like you said, for somebody who is toxic, they pick that up and they run with it, versus somebody who's not toxic. They, you know what I'm saying, they'll take notice to it, and they might even have a conversation with you about it, because, you know, when you make somebody your world and you're consumed with them, if they have a lifestyle where they're doing their own things, they won't want you making they won't want you to do that, because sometimes
they won't balance. And I think that, like you said, if that's a healthy person, it's going to become an issue, because what's going to happen is you're going to have that need to always be calling them and you know, just kind of bugging them, like, what you doing? And you know, they're still going to they gym or whatever they've been doing, and now you don't drop your life. And then they'll tell you, the minute you say, well, I dropped this or I stopped this, they'll tell you, I didn't ask you to do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was trying to get to. Thank you for putting that out there for me. Okay, and then my last question, just to stem from what you were talking about, all the things that you went through. You know, you were going through all of that in the background, but you still, you know, were there for other people and held events and pushed through. Like, on a mental health standpoint, how would you encourage somebody who's going through a lot of things, but, you know, they still want to push through in life? What advice would you give to them?
I think the biggest thing that is it doesn't matter how, like they say, a mustard seed is very small. And I think when you think about hope, it doesn't have to be really big. If you just got a small part of you that says, you know, I want to have a life, I want to live, I don't want to just exist, even with the mental health condition. As long as you have that hope, you will be able to push through. And sometimes when we are around people who we know that may be, you know, having a difficult time, sometimes we have to hold the hope for them when they don't have it for themselves. But I think the biggest thing is that, again, you have to be willing to reach out and get the help that you need. I think it's actually mental health awareness month. We're in May. And I think the biggest thing is that we got to talk about it. We got to, you know, bring awareness, and we got to end the stigma, because so many people don't get help because of the stigma. They don't want to be labeled as crazy or something is wrong with me. In our community, you know, counseling and therapy and medication is just something that has been shunned. You know, again, we've lived with a lot of dysfunction, generations and generations, and no one never got help. So that's just not what we do in our community. But we got to know that your brain is an organ, just like your heart or anything else. And if you're not well mentally, just the same way you would go to the doctor if you had if you were having heart problems, if you had asthma or whatever, if you're having emotional and mental concerns, it's okay to seek help. help is what's going to help you to be able to live a good life. You have so many famous people, celebrities, who talk about how they have bipolar or they have this and they have that, but they are striving and they're doing well. So they are the evidence. I'm the evidence that you can live. I live with depression and anxiety. It does not have to be your life. And, so many people, even when they introduce themselves, I've learned that in trainings, they say, hey, I'm bipolar or I'm this. No, that's your condition. That's a diagnosis. Who are you? So you cannot let the diagnosis take over you. You are still a human being, and you have to go and take your power back over the diagnosis. And the way that you do that is by getting the help that you need. And it doesn't mean that you have to be on medication. Sometimes all you need to do is get some therapy and start unpacking things and start your healing process that way. Sometimes it might mean that you need to engage in wellness activities like yoga. Work exercising is one of the biggest antidepressants. Getting sunlight, vitamin D. So it's a whole lifestyle change. You have your faith, keep that. But, in addition, start with talking therapy. Once you go to that therapist, you can get tested and find out exactly what your diagnosis is, or if you have one. You may not have one. Sometimes people just go through a stressful time and they just might need a therapist to kind of readjust and get them out of that space. But there may be a chemical imbalance, or there may be because of hereditary, if it runs in your family. So in that place, you might want to go get the testing, and you can get that done at a psychologist's office and find out, hey, is it depression? Is it bipolar? What is it? And then once you can find that out, you can talk with your doctor, which would be a psychiatrist, and your therapist, and find out, okay, do I need medication, or is this something that can be managed just through my therapy and as well as my other wellness activities? Because what we have found that is not just therapy, or it's not just medication. Again, it's a lifestyle change. Some of the stuff in our diets we have to work on. Like I said, wellness activities, vitamin D, all of those things, self-care, all of those things are important to taking care of your mental health. And once, you work with that doctor and that therapist and you find out what you need, you go from there. Sometimes there is even a lot of natural things that you can take to help with your moods and depression. But again, always consult with your doctor, because you may have other, underlying health conditions. So even when we take natural stuff, we want to make sure we're letting them know, because it can have, interactions with other medications and things that we're taking. So I always start there first. But I think it's just getting over the fear of thinking that, you're going to be labeled as crazy, or you're going to have to take this medication. You're not crazy. You're actually a healthy person, because when you can say, hey, I feel this way, and I know that I need to go seek help and do something about it, that's being healthy. That's not being crazy.
Agreed.
And medication, that's another thing. Advocate for yourself. Even if you have to get on medication, if you start taking it and it's making you, some people say, well, I'm feeling like a zombie, or it's not working. You have to communicate with your doctor and tell them what you're feeling, and you have to continue on until you get on whatever is best for you. And again, everybody does not need medication. So that's the biggest myth. I think people are so afraid that even if they go to a doctor, that they're just going to slam them on medication. And that's not true. So just be comfortable, with seeking the help. And then, whatever you do to get well, whatever that is, you have to keep doing it with mental health. I tell people, it's like losing weight. Whatever you did to get that weight off, you have to keep doing it to manage it. So the same thing with mental health. You can't just stop, because life is going to keep happening. Just like now we're dealing with this crisis. So you could be in a good place mentally, and then bam, here come the coronavirus pandemic. And all of us are struggling right now. So you got to keep doing that. And then when hard stuff happens in your life, like now, then you may have to go back to your therapist. Maybe you were going once a week in the beginning, and now you're seeing your therapist once a month. Well, now we're in this pandemic. Maybe you have to go back to, once a week. So you got to keep working on it. And another thing is that with depression, I think is one of the biggest things that we have in our community. Isolation is not good for depression. And so you have to make sure that you're connecting with people, that when people reach out to you, it's hard because depression wants you to stay isolated and stay in. But when people reach out to you, I look at it like a lifesaver. You got to grab a hold of that lifesaver and reach out to those resources and the support systems and just not suffer in silence, because the more you stay in silence and isolation, the worse it will get.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. Dunyell, could you let the audience know where they can find you, just in case they want to look more into your nonprofit or even reach out to you for coaching, because you are a great mentor?
Thank you. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. So if you want to find out more about My Girls Inc., you can go to www.mygirlsinc.org. Again, that's www.mygirlsinc.org. And it's all lowercase MYGIRLSINC Inc.org. And so again, that's MYGIRLSINC.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at My Girls Inc. If you're interested in coaching or something more on a one-on-one, you can feel free to email me. It's Dunyell Dawson at gmail.com. And that's DUNYELL DAWSON at gmail.com. And you can also follow my blog, my motivational blog, on Facebook and Instagram at DD Soapbox. And that's DD, the letters DD, Soap, SOAPBOX. So DD Soapbox, and that's on Facebook and Instagram. And if you are a lady and interested in joining my sister circle, we're on Facebook. We have a pink profile picture with black writing, and it's My Sister Circle. It's a great women's empowerment group. So hopefully you can join it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that information so people can follow you. I will also have all of that information in the show notes. Thank you for coming on again, Dunyell, and thank you for all of the listeners out there who tuned in today. You guys have a great one.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to today's show. If you liked this podcast, please download and subscribe. If there's anything you would like to talk about in regards to relationships, or would like to be a guest on the show to speak on relationships or get advice, you can always connect via social media at Playing for Keeps, or email DJ at info@p4kdating.com. Thank you for tuning in, and bye for now.